Have you ever sat at a table surrounded by people who think they know your worth, while secretly holding the keys to their entire livelihood? My name is Marcus, and what happened that October evening changed everything between me and my family, forever. I'd love to know which corner of the globe you're watching from, and if this story speaks to you, make sure to subscribe. Tomorrow's video is one you absolutely can't miss. The smell of my aunt's famous pot roast filled the dining room, but the conversation brewing around the mahogany table was anything but appetizing. It was our annual family gathering at Uncle Robert's house in suburban Chicago, and as usual, everyone was eager to discuss their latest promotions, bonuses, and career achievements. My cousin Jessica adjusted her blazer and cleared her throat. So I got promoted to senior marketing coordinator at Henderson Industries. $48,000 base salary plus benefits. She beamed as my Aunt Sandra practically glowed with pride. That's wonderful, honey, Aunt Sandra gushed, passing the mashed potatoes. And what about you, Kevin? My brother Kevin straightened up. Well, I'm now a team lead in the accounting department. Same company, actually. They bumped me up to $52,000. He shot a sideways glance at me. It's amazing what you can achieve when you apply yourself. The comment hung in the air like smoke. Everyone knew it was directed at me. Uncle Robert, Jessica's father, leaned back in his chair. Henderson Industries. Really takes care of their people. Great company culture, excellent management. They're expanding too. Just hired another 100 employees last month. Speaking of work, Jessica said, her voice taking on that particular tone I'd heard 1,000 times before. Marcus, how's your job going? She said job like it was a dirty word. 23 faces turned toward me, some curious, others barely concealing their pity. I set down my fork and smiled. It's going well, thanks. Still at that coffee shop downtown? This came from my cousin David, Jessica's younger brother, who worked in Henderson's IT department. Still there. My father, William, shifted uncomfortably. I could see the familiar disappointment creeping across his weathered face. At 62, he'd worked his way up from factory floor to plant supervisor over 30 years. The idea that his youngest son was content making lattes was a constant source of frustration. Son, he said quietly, you know Henderson is always hiring. Robert could put in a good word. Uncle Robert nodded enthusiastically. Absolutely. With your college degree, you could start in management training. Maybe not executive level immediately, but I appreciate that. I interrupted gently. But I'm happy where I am. The silence that followed was deafening. My stepmother Linda exchanged a look with Aunt Sandra that spoke volumes. Kevin shook his head like I'd just announced I was joining the circus. Jessica leaned forward, her voice dripping with false concern. Marcus, you're 28 years old. Don't you want more? I mean, what are you making? Like $8 an hour? $9.50, I corrected. She gasped dramatically. $9.50? Marcus, I spend more than that on lunch. How do you even survive? David chimed in. Dude, I make that in about 6 minutes at Henderson's. 6 minutes. The laughter started small. A chuckle from David, a snort from Kevin. But it grew. Soon half the table was laughing, not with me, but at me. At my minimum wage job, my apparent lack of ambition, my contentment with what they saw as failure. I'm sorry, Jessica said, wiping her eyes. I don't mean to laugh, but $9.50 an hour? What's that, like $20,000 a year? Before taxes? About $19,000, I said calmly. More laughter erupted. Uncle Robert tried to stifle his grin. Son, my property taxes are more than your annual salary. My grandmother, Eleanor, who'd been quietly eating her dinner, finally spoke up. Now, Robert, there's nothing wrong with honest work. Of course not, Mom, he replied quickly. But Marcus has a business degree from Northwestern. He could be making real money at Henderson, or any decent company for that matter. Instead, he's slinging coffee, David added. It's like having a Ferrari and using it to deliver pizza. The comparison sent another wave of laughter around the table. I caught my father's eye. He wasn't laughing, but he wasn't defending me either, just staring at his plate with that familiar look of disappointment. Marcus, Linda said, her voice, taking on that condescending tone she used when she thought she was being helpful. Honey, we're not trying to hurt your feelings. We're family. We just want what's best for you. Which is why you should seriously consider Henderson, Jessica added. I could even put in a word with my supervisor. She's really cool, very down to earth. I'm sure she'd give you a shot in entry-level management. The benefits alone would triple your current compensation, Kevin said. Health insurance, dental, vision, 401k matching. I mean, you do have health insurance, right? I shook my head. Can't afford it. The pity in their eyes was almost unbearable. Aunt Sandra actually put her hand over her heart. Oh, Marcus. What if you get sick? Jessica asked, genuinely horrified. What if you break your leg or something? I'll figure it out. David pulled out his phone. Dude, I'm looking at entry-level positions at Henderson right now. Look, customer service representative. Starts at $16 an hour. That's almost double what you're making. He held up his phone like he was showing me salvation itself. Administrative assistant, $18 an hour, Kevin added, looking over David's shoulder. Either of those would be a huge step up. Plus, Jessica said, warming to the subject, Henderson has incredible advancement opportunities. I started as a basic marketing assistant 2 years ago, and look where I am now. You could be earning $40,000, $50,000 within a couple years if you really applied yourself. The chorus of agreement around the table was overwhelming. Everyone had an opinion about my life, my choices, my apparent waste of potential. They spoke about me like I wasn't sitting right there, planning my future without consulting me, mapping out a career path I hadn't asked for. Uncle Robert stood up to refill his wine glass. You know what the real tragedy is? Henderson's CEO, Richard Morrison, he's probably younger than Marcus. Started the company 15 years ago, and now look at it. Over 2,000 employees, offices in 6 states. That's what ambition looks like. I heard he's worth like $50 million, David said, still scrolling through his phone. At least, Jessica agreed. And he's only 33. Can you imagine? 33 and running a company that big. My father finally looked up. Marcus, these people are offering you an opportunity. Real opportunity. Why won't you take it? The old question hung in the air like a challenge. 23 pairs of eyes focused on me, waiting for an explanation they could understand. How could I tell them that their concern, their offers, their pity, it was all based on a fundamental misunderstanding of who I was and what I'd accomplished? I appreciate everyone's concern, I said carefully. I really do. But I'm exactly where I want to be. The collective sigh around the table was audible. Jessica shook her head sadly. Marcus, wanting to be poor isn't noble. It's just sad. Especially when you don't have to be, Kevin added. I mean, we're literally offering you a way out. David looked up from his phone again. Okay, here's another one. Warehouse supervisor at Henderson. $22 an hour to start. Marcus, that's more than double what you're making. More than double. The excitement in his voice was genuine. He really thought he was helping me. They all did. In their minds, they were staging an intervention, saving me from a life of poverty and wasted potential. But then my phone buzzed. I glanced at the screen and saw my assistant's name, Sarah Chen. I'd told her to only call if it was urgent. Excuse me, I said, standing up. I need to take this. Jessica rolled her eyes. Who could possibly be calling you at this hour? Your manager is asking you to cover another shift. The laughter followed me as I walked toward the kitchen, accepting the call. Sarah? Is everything okay? Her voice was crisp and professional as always. Hi, Marcus. Sorry to interrupt your evening, but I wanted to confirm the final signatures came through on the Phoenix expansion. Legal cleared everything this afternoon, and we're ready to announce the new facility Monday morning. A lot of love and effort went into bringing this story to life. If you're enjoying it, we'd be so grateful if you'd subscribe to our channel. Now, back to where we left off. Yes. You have an assistant? David's voice cracked slightly. For making coffee? I took a bite of pot roast, chewing slowly while they processed this information. The confusion on their faces was almost comical. Marcus, Linda said carefully. What exactly do you do at this coffee shop? I swallowed and met her eyes. I make coffee. But you have an assistant, Uncle Robert said, his brow furrowed. Yes, Kevin leaned forward. That doesn't make sense. Why would someone making $9.50 an hour have an assistant? The question everyone was thinking but nobody wanted to ask directly hung in the air between us. I could see the gears turning in their heads, trying to reconcile what they thought they knew about my life with this new, confusing piece of information. Jessica's phone buzzed. She glanced at it and her face went pale. What is it? David asked. She stared at her screen, then slowly looked up at me. I just got an email from Henderson Industries. Emergency meeting Monday morning. All employees are required to attend. Kevin's phone buzzed next. Then David's, then Uncle Robert's. One by one, they all received the same message. The silence at the table was no longer comfortable. It was electric, charged with questions nobody quite knew how to ask. They looked at me, then at their phones, then back at me. And for the first time that evening, nobody was laughing. The confusion around that dinner table wasn't the first time my family had misunderstood me. To understand how we got to that moment, you need to know where I came from. Growing up as the youngest of 3 boys in the Thompson family meant being constantly compared to my older brothers. Michael, the eldest, had followed Dad's path into manufacturing, eventually becoming a plant manager in Detroit. Kevin, the middle child, had always been the academic star. Straight A's, honor society, full scholarship to University of Illinois for accounting. Then there was me. I wasn't the star athlete like Michael, and I wasn't the bookworm like Kevin. I was the quiet one who asked too many questions and spent too much time thinking about how things worked. While my brothers collected trophies and academic awards, I collected experiences, working odd jobs around the neighborhood, watching how different businesses operated, and studying people. When I was 12, I started mowing lawns in our subdivision. Not because we needed the money, but because I was fascinated by the economics of it. How much could I charge? How long did each yard take? What made customers satisfied versus disappointed? I kept detailed notebooks tracking every job, every expense, every lesson learned. My father found those notebooks once and just shook his head. Son, you're turning fun into work. But for me, it didn't work. It was education. By high school, I was running a small landscaping operation with 4 other kids from school. I handled the finances, scheduling, and customer relationships while they did most of the physical labor. We were pulling in $3,000 a month during the summer season, split 5 ways. Not bad for teenagers. My parents viewed it as a distraction from academics. Marcus, my mother would say, you need to focus on getting into a good college, not playing businessman. The assumption was always that this was a phase, that eventually I'd settle into a traditional career, path like my brothers had. When I got accepted to Northwestern for business, everyone was relieved. Finally, Marcus was getting serious. But college only reinforced what I already suspected. I learned more from running my landscaping business than I did from most of my classes. Don't get me wrong, the education was valuable. I absorbed everything. I could about finance, marketing, organizational behavior, and strategic planning. But the real education happened during summers when I expanded the business to include property maintenance and small construction projects. By my senior year, I was managing 12 employees and contracts worth over $100,000. annually. My business professor, Dr. Elizabeth Warren, not the senator, a different person entirely, pulled me aside one day. "Marcus, what are you planning to do after graduation?" "I'm not sure yet," I said, which was partly true. "Have you considered consulting? Or maybe an MBA program? Your business case analyses are some of the best I've seen." I thanked her for the encouragement, but I already knew my path wasn't going to be traditional. While my classmates were interviewing for positions at major corporations, I was quietly studying market inefficiencies in the service industry. During my final semester, I noticed something interesting. Every business near campus, restaurants, retail stores, office buildings, struggled with the same problems: staffing, scheduling, inventory management, customer service consistency. They were all solving the same challenges independently, often poorly and always expensively. What if there was a better way? The idea that would eventually become Henderson Industries started as a simple observation. Most small and medium-sized businesses needed the same operational support that large corporations had, but they couldn't afford to build those systems themselves. After graduation, while Kevin started his accounting job and Michael got promoted to assistant plant manager, I moved back home and told my parents I was taking some time to figure things out. The disappointment was immediate and intense. "Marcus," my father said, "you didn't spend 4 years at Northwestern to come back and live in your childhood bedroom." But I wasn't planning to live in my childhood bedroom for long. I just needed time to build something. I spent 6 months working at various service businesses around Chicago, restaurants, cleaning services, small retail operations. I told everyone, including my family, that I was finding myself and exploring different career options. They thought I was having some kind of quarter-life crisis. Really, I was conducting market research. I worked as a server at 3 different restaurants, learning how they managed scheduling, inventory, and customer complaints. I spent 2 months with a commercial cleaning company, understanding their operational challenges. I even worked retail at an electronics store, watching how they handled everything from staff training to customer service protocols. My family watched this job hopping with growing concern. At family gatherings, the questions became increasingly pointed. "When are you going to use that expensive degree?" Uncle Robert would ask. "Have you considered the corporate training program at Henderson Industries?" This from Jessica, who'd just been hired there herself. The irony wasn't lost on me, even then. 8 months after graduation, I had enough research and a clear business plan. I liquidated my landscaping business, cashed out my college savings, and borrowed $15,000 from my grandmother, the only family member who didn't ask what I planned to do with the money. Henderson Industries started in a shared workspace in downtown Chicago. Just me, a laptop, and an idea. Provide operational support services to small and medium businesses who couldn't afford to build their own infrastructure. The first client was a family-owned restaurant in Lincoln Park. They were struggling with scheduling, inventory management, and customer service training. I offered to solve all 3 problems for $1,200 a month, less than they were spending on wasted inventory alone. Within 3 months, their efficiency had improved by 30%, customer complaints dropped by 60%, and their profit margins increased by 15%. They referred me to 2 other restaurants. By the end of my first year, I had 8 clients and was generating $45,000 in monthly recurring revenue. I hired my first employee, Sarah Chen, a Northwestern classmate who was brilliant with systems and operations. But here's the thing. I didn't tell my family about any of this. When they asked what I was doing for work, I said I was consulting. When they asked what kind of consulting, I said business operations. When they pressed for details, I gave vague answers about helping small businesses run more efficiently. To them, consulting meant I was still figuring things out, still not settled into a real career. They assumed I was making modest money helping mom-and-pop shops balance their books, or something equally small-scale. The assumption suited me perfectly. Year 2 brought 15 new clients and the need for a real office. I rented a small space in River North and hired 3 more employees. Revenue hit $200,000 monthly. I started targeting larger clients, small chains, professional service firms, manufacturing companies. My family still thought I was playing around with small business consulting. "Marcus is doing his own thing," became my father's standard explanation when people asked about my career. The tone suggested both resignation and mild embarrassment. Year 3 changed everything. I landed my first major contract with a regional restaurant chain that had 47 locations across Illinois and Wisconsin. They were hemorrhaging money due to operational inefficiencies, inconsistent service, poor inventory management, high employee turnover. I didn't just solve their problems. I revolutionized their entire operation. Within 6 months, their locations were operating at 92% efficiency, customer satisfaction scores had increased by 40%, and they'd reduced operating costs by 28%. They were so impressed, they offered to buy my company for $2 million. I turned them down and pitched them something better. Let me scale this solution for other businesses like theirs. They became my first major investor, putting in $500,000 for a 15% stake in Henderson Industries. Yes, Henderson Industries. I named it after Henderson Street, where my grandmother lived when I was growing up. The same grandmother who'd loaned me the money to start the company. It seemed fitting. With that investment, I hired 12 more employees, moved to a larger office, and started marketing to mid-sized companies across the Midwest. The business model was simple. We provided complete operational support, staffing, scheduling, inventory management, customer service protocols, employee training, for companies that needed it but couldn't afford to build those capabilities internally. We became the operational backbone for businesses that wanted to focus on what they did best, while we handled everything else. By year 4, Henderson Industries had 60 employees and was generating $15 million in annual revenue. We'd expanded to serve clients in 6 states and were being recognized as one of the fastest-growing service companies in the region. And my family still thought I was a small-time consultant struggling to find my footing. The disconnect was almost surreal. While I was hiring VPs and opening new offices, my cousins were getting excited about their annual raises and small promotions. While I was meeting with investors and planning national expansion, Uncle Robert was offering to put in a good word for me at his company, the company I owned. Because here's what they didn't know. In year 3, when I was looking for ways to test our operational systems at scale, I acquired a struggling mid-sized company that provided business services to other companies. It was hemorrhaging money, had terrible management, and employed about 400 people who were demoralized and directionless. It was perfect. I bought it for $800,000, which was essentially the value of their client contracts and office equipment. Then I spent 6 months completely restructuring their operations using Henderson Industries methodologies. The turnaround was dramatic. Within 8 months, they were profitable. Within 12 months, they were thriving. Within 18 months, they were the go-to operational support company for businesses across the Midwest. I kept the original name because it had established relationships and brand recognition in the market. But I restructured everything: management, processes, employee development, client service protocols. That struggling company I'd acquired? It became the Henderson Industries that my family members now worked for. Jessica had been hired during our expansion phase when we were rapidly growing the marketing department. Kevin joined when we needed experienced accountants to handle our increasingly complex financial operations. David came on board when we built out our IT infrastructure to support clients across multiple states. Uncle Robert? He'd been there since before I acquired the company. When I restructured management, his experience and solid work ethic made him a natural fit for a leadership role. They were all good employees. Competent, reliable, exactly the kind of people who'd helped transform Henderson Industries into the success it had become. But they had no idea who actually owned the company they worked for. In their minds, Henderson Industries was run by some young hotshot entrepreneur they'd never met. The mysterious Richard Morrison that Uncle Robert had mentioned at dinner, that was the fictional CEO I'd created to maintain my anonymity. Sarah Chen, my assistant, handled most day-to-day communications with department heads, so employees rarely dealt directly with senior leadership. As far as my family was concerned, they worked for a successful company that happened to have an invisible owner, while their underachieving cousin Marcus was still playing around with small business, consulting and making coffee for minimum wage. The coffee shop was my latest market research project. I'd been studying service industry operations for a potential expansion into food service support. Working there 3 days a week gave me ground-level insight into everything from inventory management to customer service protocols to staff scheduling challenges. I wasn't making coffee because I needed the money. I was making coffee because I needed the education. But explaining that to my family would have required explaining everything else. And honestly, I wasn't sure I was ready for that conversation. Not yet. While my family saw me as the underachiever making coffee for pocket change, the reality of my daily life was drastically different. My typical week involved a delicate balance between maintaining my cover and running a multi-million-dollar operation. Monday mornings started at 5:30 a.m. in my penthouse apartment overlooking Lake Michigan. The space was minimalist by design, clean, lines, expensive furniture, floor-to-ceiling windows offering stunning views of the city. But my family had never been there. As far as they knew, I lived in a modest studio apartment near the coffee shop. After my morning workout in the building's private gym, I'd spend 2 hours reviewing Henderson Industries' weekly reports. Sarah would have everything organized on my tablet: revenue projections, new client acquisitions, operational efficiency metrics from our various divisions, and updates from our 6 regional offices. By 8 a.m., I was dressed in jeans and a t-shirt, driving my deliberately modest Honda Civic to Brewster's Coffee House on North State Street. The owner, Patricia Martinez, had no idea she was employing the CEO of one of Chicago's fastest-growing companies. To her, I was just Marcus, reliable, hardworking, and mysteriously overqualified for a barista position. Working at Brewster's wasn't just market research anymore. It had become my perfect cover and my window into the operational challenges facing small businesses every day. Patricia struggled with the same issues I'd seen across hundreds of companies: unpredictable staffing, inventory waste, inconsistent customer service, and razor-thin profit margins. Between customers, I'd take notes on my phone. Not obvious research notes, but casual observations that looked like text messages. How Patricia handled supplier negotiations, how she managed employee schedules around peak hours, how she dealt with equipment breakdowns and customer complaints. These observations were gold for Henderson Industries' food service division, which we were planning to launch the following year. At 2 p.m., my coffee shop shift would end, and my real workday would begin. I'd drive to Henderson Industries headquarters, in the Loop, a gleaming 30-story building where 3 entire floors housed our operations. The building directory listed Henderson Industries on floors 23, 24, and 25, but it didn't mention that the company owned the entire building, because we did. The purchase had been strategic. Real estate in downtown Chicago was expensive but stable, and owning our headquarters eliminated rent while providing long-term asset appreciation. Plus, we leased space to other businesses on floors 1 through 22, generating substantial additional revenue. My private elevator went directly to the 25th floor, bypassing the main Henderson Industries reception on 23. Most employees never saw this floor. It housed executive offices, the boardroom, and my personal office, a corner space with panoramic city views and enough room for a full conference table. Sarah would be waiting with the afternoon schedule. Usually, it included client calls, strategic planning sessions with department heads, and investor meetings. Everything was carefully orchestrated to maintain the fiction that Richard Morrison ran the company while I remained invisible. The client portfolio had grown beyond anything I'd imagined when I started. We now provided operational support to over 300 businesses across 8 states. Our services included everything from complete HR management to supply chain optimization to customer service protocols. Our largest client was a manufacturing company in Ohio with 1,200 employees. We managed their entire non-production operations, HR, scheduling, inventory, quality control, even their customer service department. They'd increased productivity by 43% and reduced operational costs by 36% since partnering with us. But it wasn't just about the numbers. We were genuinely improving these businesses and the lives of their employees. Companies that had been struggling were now thriving. Workers who'd been trapped in inefficient systems were now part of well-organized, profitable operations. The irony was that some of our clients competed directly with companies where my family members worked. Jessica's marketing expertise at Henderson Industries was being used to help our clients outperform businesses similar to where my father worked. Kevin's financial analysis was optimizing operations for companies that were taking market share from Uncle Robert's former employer. They were contributing to my success without knowing it. The financial growth had been exponential. Year 5 brought $48 million in revenue. Year 6 pushed us past $70 million. By year 7, we were approaching $100 million in annual revenue with profit margins that made our investors very happy. But the money wasn't the most satisfying part. It was the impact. We'd helped a failing restaurant chain avoid bankruptcy and grow from 12 locations to 37. We'd turned around a manufacturing company so effectively that they'd been able to hire 400 new employees. We'd helped dozens of small businesses grow into medium businesses, and several medium businesses expand nationally. Every success story represented real people keeping their jobs, feeding their families, building their careers. My personal wealth had grown accordingly. Between my ownership stake in Henderson Industries, the real estate investments, and a diversified portfolio managed by a private wealth firm, my net worth had crossed 8 figures 2 years ago. I could have bought and sold my family's concerns about my financial security several times over. But I wasn't ready to reveal that yet. The deception had become almost addictive. There was something intoxicating about sitting at family dinners, listening to them discuss their modest successes and career concerns, while knowing I could solve any financial problem they had with a single phone call. More than that, I was learning something valuable about human nature. How people treated you when they thought you had nothing versus how they behaved when they knew you had everything. The contrast was illuminating. The coffee shop work had taught me other lessons too. Patricia had been struggling to compete with the big chain stores that had moved into the neighborhood. Her overhead was higher, her buying power was lower, and she couldn't match their marketing budgets, but she had something they didn't: flexibility and personal service. I'd been quietly helping her optimize her operations. Nothing obvious, just casual suggestions about scheduling, inventory management, and customer service improvements. Within 6 months, her daily revenue had increased by 28%, and customer satisfaction scores had improved dramatically. She attributed the improvements to her own business instincts and my surprisingly good suggestions for a college kid. She had no idea she was receiving consulting advice from someone whose company charged Fortune 500 companies millions for the same insights. The success at Brewster's had become a proof of concept for our planned food service division. We could take any small restaurant or cafe and dramatically improve their operations within months. The potential market was enormous. Thousands of independent food service businesses struggling with the same challenges Patricia had faced. But the food service expansion was just one of several major initiatives we were developing. Henderson Industries had grown beyond operational support. We were becoming a comprehensive business transformation company. Our newest division focused on technology integration, helping traditional businesses implement modern systems without disrupting their core operations. We'd also launched Henderson Real Estate, acquiring and improving commercial properties across the Midwest. The portfolio included office buildings, retail spaces, and industrial facilities that we leased to our clients and other businesses. The synergies were powerful. When we helped a client business grow, we could offer them expanded office space in our buildings. When they needed additional operational support, our consulting division was ready. When they required technology upgrades, our tech integration team could handle the transition. We were creating an ecosystem where our success drove our clients' success, which in turn drove more success for us. The board meetings had become exercises in managing rapid growth rather than fighting for survival. Our latest investor, a private equity firm from New York, had valued Henderson Industries at over $200 million. They'd offered to buy a controlling stake for $120 million. I'd turned them down. Not because the offer wasn't attractive, but because I wasn't finished building. Henderson Industries was on track to become a billion-dollar company within 5 years. Why sell now when the best growth was still ahead of us? Plus, selling would have required revealing my identity to a much broader audience. The private equity deal would have meant disclosure documents, press releases, and public recognition as the company's founder and CEO. I wasn't ready for that level of exposure. Not yet. The anonymity had become both a strategic advantage and a personal choice. It allowed me to continue gathering ground-level intelligence through roles like the coffee shop job. It let me observe market conditions and customer behavior without the filter that came with being known as a successful CEO. But more importantly, it let me control the narrative of my life. My family's assumptions about my lack of success said more about their values and perspectives than they did about my actual circumstances. They measured worth by traditional markers: job titles, salaries, corporate benefits, social status. They couldn't see success that didn't fit their familiar patterns. This blindness had cost them opportunities to understand what I was actually doing, but it had also protected them from their own biases and expectations. If they'd known about Henderson Industries from the beginning, every family gathering would have become a request for jobs, investment advice, or business favors. Uncle Robert would have wanted me to expand in his direction. Jessica would have expected special treatment and rapid promotions. Kevin would have assumed he deserved a senior financial role regardless of qualifications. The dynamic would have shifted from family to business relationships, with all the complications that entailed. By maintaining the fiction of my modest circumstances, I'd kept our family relationships relatively pure. Their treatment of me, dismissive, condescending, occasionally cruel, was based on their honest assessment of what they thought I'd accomplished. It stung, but it was real, and it was about to change forever, because the Phoenix expansion Sarah had called about wasn't just another business milestone. It was the growth phase that would require Henderson Industries to go public with our leadership structure. The scale of operations, the regulatory requirements, and the investor relationships all demanded transparency about who actually ran the company. Within 6 months, my name would be on Securities and Exchange Commission filings as the founder and CEO of Henderson Industries. Trade publications would cover our expansion. Local business journals would want interviews. The carefully constructed fiction of Richard Morrison was about to collapse, and with it, my family's understanding of who I really was. The emergency meeting they'd all been called to attend on Monday morning, that was Henderson Industries preparing to announce not just the Phoenix expansion, but a complete restructuring of our public presence. For the first time in 7 years, I was going to step out of the shadows and claim credit for what I'd built. But I wasn't planning to make that announcement at a corporate meeting surrounded by HR representatives and PowerPoint presentations. I had something much more personal in mind. The weekend after that dinner felt like the calm before a storm. I went about my normal routine. Saturday morning at Brewster's, helping Patricia with inventory and training a new employee named Miguel. She'd been able to hire him because business had improved so dramatically over the past few months. "Marcus," she said as I showed Miguel how to properly clean the espresso machine, "I don't know what I did to deserve such good luck lately, but this place is finally starting to feel profitable." If she only knew that her good luck was sitting 3 feet away, wearing a Brewster's apron and making $12 in tips. Sunday was typically my day for strategic planning. I'd spend hours in my home office reviewing market analysis, competitive intelligence, and growth projections. But this Sunday felt different. I kept thinking about those emergency meeting notifications my family had received. Sarah had scheduled the all-hands meeting for Monday at 10 a.m. Every Henderson Industries employee would be required to attend, from entry-level administrative assistants to senior management. The official reason was to announce the Phoenix expansion and discuss organizational restructuring. The real reason was to prepare for my transition from shadow CEO to public face of the company. I'd been avoiding this moment for years, but the business had outgrown my ability to remain anonymous. Our investors wanted clear leadership accountability. Our clients needed to know who they were really working with. And frankly, maintaining the Richard Morrison fiction was becoming increasingly complicated as we scaled. But I hadn't anticipated how the revelation would affect my family. Monday morning arrived with an unseasonable chill for October. I was at Brewster's by 7 a.m., preparing for what would likely be my last normal shift there. Patricia was nervous about something. I could tell by the way she kept checking her phone and reorganizing the pastry display. "Everything okay?" I asked while restocking coffee beans. "Oh, it's nothing," she said, then immediately contradicted herself. "Actually, it's probably something. Miguel called in sick, and we've got that corporate catering order for Henderson Industries this morning. 40 coffees and pastries for some big meeting they're having." I nearly dropped the bag of espresso beans. "Henderson Industries?" "Yeah, they're one of our regular corporate clients. Big company downtown. They order from us maybe once a month for meetings and events." She paused, looking worried. "Think you can handle the delivery run? I'd do it myself, but I can't leave the shop understaffed." The irony was so perfect it felt like the universe was playing a practical joke. Here I was, about to reveal myself as the CEO of Henderson Industries, and I'd be doing it while delivering coffee from my minimum wage job. "Sure," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I can handle it." By 9:15 a.m., I was loading 40 coffee cups and an assortment of pastries into Brewster's delivery van, a dinged-up Ford Transit that had seen better days. The plan was to drop off the order, then quietly slip up to the 25th floor to prepare for the meeting. But as I pulled into Henderson Industries' loading dock, I saw something that changed everything. Kevin's car was in the visitor parking area. So was Jessica's. And David's. They'd all arrived early, probably anxious about the mysterious emergency meeting. Through the lobby windows, I could see them clustered together near the elevator bank, talking in hushed, worried tones. Uncle Robert was there too, along with several other Henderson Industries employees I recognized. My family was nervous, scared even. Emergency meetings in corporate America usually meant layoffs, restructuring, or bad news. They had no idea they were about to receive the shock of their lives. I made the coffee delivery to the 23rd floor reception area, where Henderson Industries' main offices were located. The receptionist, Maria Santos, greeted me with a professional smile. "Thanks, Marcus. Perfect timing as always. They're setting up the auditorium now." Maria had been working at Henderson Industries for 3 years. She knew me as the reliable delivery guy from Brewster's who somehow always seemed to understand exactly what the company needed for their events. She had no idea she'd been taking delivery orders from her actual boss. "Big meeting today?" I asked, playing dumb. "The biggest. All hands mandatory attendance. They're announcing some major changes." She lowered her voice conspiratorially. Rumor is we might finally get to meet the real CEO. You know how mysterious leadership has been around here. I nodded sympathetically and headed back to the elevator, my heart pounding. In 45 minutes, Maria would discover that the coffee delivery guy she'd been chatting with for 3 years was the mysterious CEO everyone speculated about. But first, I needed to get to the 25th floor and transform from Marcus the barista into Marcus Thompson, founder and CEO of Henderson Industries. The executive elevator carried me up to my private floor, where Sarah was waiting with a garment bag and a tablet full of final preparations. "How are you feeling?" she asked, as I changed from my Brewster's t-shirt into a tailored navy suit. "Like, I'm about to blow up my family's understanding of reality," I said, adjusting my tie. "Are you ready for that?" I considered the question. Was I ready to see the looks on their faces when they realized the cousin they'd been mocking for 7 years actually owned the company that employed them? Was I ready to watch their worldview collapse in real time? Honestly, I've been ready for this moment for years. I just didn't know it would happen like this. At 9:55 a.m., I took the elevator down to the 24th floor auditorium. The room was packed with over 400 Henderson Industries employees, including virtually everyone from the Chicago headquarters and video conference connections to our regional offices. I entered through the back door, unnoticed by the crowd. My family was sitting in the third row. Jessica, Kevin, David, and Uncle Robert clustered together like they were facing a firing squad. Their body language screamed anxiety. Sarah stepped to the podium and called for attention. "Good morning, everyone. Thank you for being here today. I know this emergency meeting has generated a lot of questions and speculation." The room fell silent. I could see my family leaning forward, bracing for bad news. "Today marks a significant milestone in Henderson Industries' growth," Sarah continued. "We're expanding operations to Phoenix, Arizona, which will create over 300 new jobs and establish our first major presence in the Southwest market." Relieved murmurs rippled through the audience. Expansion meant growth, not layoffs. I saw Jessica's shoulders relax slightly. "But more importantly," Sarah said, "today is the day we finally introduce you to the person who founded this company 7 years ago and has been guiding our strategy from behind the scenes." Now the room was electric with curiosity. Everyone knew Henderson Industries had a mysterious leadership structure. The CEO was a figure they'd heard about but never seen. Richard Morrison had always been a name on organizational charts and company documents, but never a physical presence. "Ladies and gentlemen," Sarah announced, "please welcome Marcus Thompson, founder and CEO of Henderson Industries." I walked from the back of the room toward the stage, watching 400 heads turn to follow my movement. The reaction was a wave of confusion, recognition, and shock that started at the back and rippled forward. But nothing could have prepared me for the expressions on my family's faces. Jessica's mouth literally fell open. Her eyes went wide, then narrowed, as if she was seeing an optical illusion she couldn't quite process. Kevin blinked rapidly, his face cycling through confusion, disbelief, and something that looked like panic. David simply stared, his face pale, looking like someone had just told him gravity was optional. Uncle Robert's reaction was the most pronounced. He half rose from his seat, then sat back down heavily, his face flushing red as the implications hit him. I reached the podium and took the microphone from Sarah. "Thank you, Sarah. And good morning, everyone." The auditorium was dead silent. You could have heard a pin drop. I know this comes as a surprise to many of you. For 7 years, I've preferred to lead Henderson Industries from behind the scenes, focusing on building our capabilities and serving our clients rather than personal recognition. I could see my family processing this information in real time. Jessica was now frantically scrolling through her phone, probably looking up everything she could find about Henderson Industries' leadership structure. But as we enter our next phase of growth, expansion into new markets, public-private partnerships, and eventually an IPO, It's time for me to step forward and take public responsibility for what we've built together." Kevin was now staring at his hands, his face bright red. I could practically see the wheels turning as he remembered every conversation we'd had about Henderson Industries, every joke about the mysterious CEO, every suggestion that I should apply for an entry-level position. "I want to be clear about something," I continued, looking directly at my family. "Henderson Industries' success belongs to all of you. Every employee in this room has contributed to our growth from a small consulting firm to one of the Midwest's fastest-growing companies." "Uncle." Robert was now gripping the arms of his chair so tightly his knuckles were white. He was remembering the dinner conversation where he'd bragged about Henderson Industries' excellent management and suggested I should be grateful for the opportunity to work there. "Over the next few months, you'll see significant changes in how we operate. More transparency in leadership, expanded employee benefits, and aggressive growth targets that will benefit everyone in this organization." I paused, letting the weight of the revelation settle over the room. "I'm proud of what we've accomplished, and I'm excited about what we're going to build next. Thank you for your trust, your hard work, and your commitment to Henderson Industries." Mission. The applause started slowly, then built to a thunderous ovation. 400 employees were on their feet, cheering for a CEO they were meeting for the first time, but whose leadership they'd been experiencing for years. Everyone was applauding, except my family. They sat frozen in their seats, still processing. The fact that the underachieving cousin they'd been mocking for years had just revealed himself as their boss. As the applause died down and employees began filing out for individual department meetings, I watched my family's faces. The shock was giving way to other emotions: embarrassment, anger, confusion, and something that looked suspiciously like fear. Because they were all remembering the same thing. Every conversation they'd had about Henderson Industries, every comment they'd made about the CEO, every suggestion that I wasn't ambitious enough to work at a company like this one, and they were realizing that I'd heard every word. Jessica was the first to move. She stood up shakily and started walking toward the exit, her face pale and her hands trembling slightly. She didn't look at me as she passed. Kevin followed, his jaw clenched and his eyes fixed on the floor. David practically ran from the auditorium, clearly overwhelmed by the magnitude of what he'd just learned. Uncle Robert was the last to leave. As he passed near the stage, he stopped and looked up at me. Our eyes met for a long moment. I could see him calculating, trying to figure out how to navigate this new reality where his nephew was suddenly his ultimate boss. He opened his mouth as if to say something, then thought better of it and walked away. I stood on that stage, watching. My family processed the fact that everything they thought they knew about me was wrong. The coffee shop worker they'd pitied was actually worth more than all of them combined. The underachiever they'd been trying to help was actually in a position to determine their professional futures. The failure they'd been mocking was actually the success story they'd been celebrating without knowing it. Sarah approached the podium. "How do you feel?" I watched the auditorium empty, knowing that in a few hours my phone would start ringing. There would be phone calls, text messages, emails, and probably some very uncomfortable family conversations. "Ask me tomorrow," I said. The silence lasted exactly 18 hours. Tuesday morning, my phone started buzzing at 6:47 a.m. The first call was from Jessica, then Kevin 2 minutes later, followed by a string of text messages that painted a clear picture of what was happening, but I didn't answer any of them. Instead, I went to Brewster's for what I knew would be my final shift. Patricia was practically bouncing with excitement when I walked in. "Marcus, did you hear? Henderson Industries is expanding to Phoenix. That's the company we delivered to yesterday. Miguel thinks we might get more catering contracts now that they're growing." I smiled and tied my apron. "That's great news, Patricia." What she didn't know was that Henderson Industries would indeed be increasing their catering orders, and I'd Already authorized Sarah to make Brewster's our exclusive coffee supplier for all Chicago area events. Patricia's little coffee shop was about to become very profitable, and she'd never know why. By 9 a.m., my phone had received 17 missed calls and 34 text messages. The desperation in those messages was escalating rapidly. Jessica. Marcus, we need to talk. Call me back, please. Kevin. Dude, I had no idea. We should grab lunch this week. David. Holy crap, man. Why didn't you tell us? We're family. Uncle Robert. Marcus, very impressive what you've built. Would love to discuss business opportunities. But it was the message from my father that cut deepest. Son, I owe you an apology. Let's talk when you're ready. I wasn't ready. Not yet. Instead, I spent Tuesday afternoon in my real office, reviewing surveillance footage from our building's security system. Henderson Industries maintained comprehensive digital records of all employee activities, not for spying, but for security and operational efficiency purposes. What I found was disturbing. At 11:23 a.m. Tuesday morning, Jessica had accessed the Y employee database using her marketing department credentials. She'd pulled detailed reports on company revenue, client lists, and organizational structure, information well beyond her clearance level. At 1:45 p.m., Kevin had accessed financial records from the accounting system, downloading quarterly profit, statements, and executive compensation data that was confidential. David's computer activity showed he'd spent 2 hours researching Henderson Industries' corporate structure, trying to piece together ownership percentages and investor relationships. But Uncle Robert's actions were the most concerning. He'd scheduled a meeting with 2 Henderson Industries clients, companies that fell under his operational oversight, for Friday afternoon. According to the calendar invitations, the meetings were titled Strategic Partnership Discussion and Expanded Service Opportunities. He was planning to leverage his new knowledge of my identity to pitch additional business deals, presumably with himself as the key liaison. My family wasn't just trying to reconnect, they were positioning themselves to profit from the revelation. Wednesday brought a new level of desperation. Jessica showed up at Brewster's during my shift. She walked in wearing a designer suit and oversized sunglasses, looking completely out of place among the students and freelancers who made up our typical clientele. Patricia raised an eyebrow as this obviously wealthy woman approached the counter where I was working. Marcus, Jessica said, her voice tight with forced casualness. What a surprise seeing you here. I work here, I replied, continuing to clean. The espresso machine. Right. Of course. She glanced around nervously. Could we talk privately for a minute? Patricia was clearly intrigued by this interaction, but I nodded toward the small break room behind the counter. Jessica followed me back, her heels clicking on the worn linoleum floor. Marcus, I feel terrible about Saturday night, she began, the moment we were alone. I had no idea about everything. Henderson Industries, I mean. You must think we're all horrible. I think you're all exactly who you've always been, I said quietly. She flinched. That's not fair. How were we supposed to know? You never told us anything. I never lied to anyone. You all made assumptions. But Marcus, she pressed, stepping closer. We're family. Doesn't that count for something? I mean, I've been working at Henderson for 2 years. I had no idea I was working for my own cousin. There it was. The angle I'd been expecting. Jessica, what do you want? She tried to look hurt by the directness of the question, but I could see the calculation in her eyes. I want us to be close again, like we used to be when we were kids. We'd never been close as kids. Jessica had barely acknowledged my existence until she needed something. And I was thinking, she continued, maybe now that everything's out in the open, we could work together more directly. I have so many ideas for Henderson Industries' marketing strategy. Being family, I could be a real asset to your executive team. There it was, less than 48 hours after learning I owned the company. She was angling for a promotion. "I appreciate your enthusiasm," I said carefully, "but Henderson Industries has a strict policy about nepotism and family members in leadership positions." Her face fell. "But surely that doesn't apply to you. You own the company." "It applies? Especially to me. I have to maintain higher standards than anyone else." She stared at me for a long moment, her expression cycling through disappointment, anger, and finally settling on something that looked like contempt. "So that's it? You're just going to pretend like we're not family?" "We're family, Jessica. We're just not business partners." She left Brewster's without buying anything, her designer heels clicking angrily across the floor. Patricia watched her go with obvious confusion. "Friend of yours?" Patricia asked. "Family," I replied. "Ah," Patricia said knowingly. "Sometimes those are the hardest relationships." Thursday brought Kevin. He was waiting outside Brewster's when I arrived for my morning shift, leaning against his Honda Accord with 2 cups of coffee from Starbucks. A deliberate insult, bringing competitor coffee to my workplace. "We need to talk," he said without preamble. "I'm working." "Marcus, this is ridiculous. You're worth millions, maybe hundreds of millions, and you're still pretending to work at a coffee shop?" I unlocked the door to Brewster's and started the opening routine, flipping on lights, starting machines, counting the register. Kevin followed me around like a frustrated puppy. "Look, I get it," he said. "You wanted to prove something. You wanted to show everyone that you could succeed without help. Mission accomplished, okay? You won. But now can we please be honest with each other?" I continued setting up for the day, not responding. "Marcus, I'm good at what I do. Really good. Henderson Industries' accounting department has been running smoothly because of my work. I've been contributing to your success for 2 years without even knowing it." Now we were getting to the real conversation. "I've been thinking," Kevin continued, "maybe it's time for me to take on more responsibility. Senior financial analyst, maybe assistant controller. I know the company inside and out." "You know your department inside and out," I corrected. "That's not the same thing." "But I could learn. Marcus, I'm family. I'm loyal. You know you can trust me." Trust. That was interesting, coming from someone who'd spent the previous day illegally accessing confidential financial records. "Kevin, your performance at Henderson Industries will be evaluated the same way as every other employee, based on merit, contribution, and adherence to company policies." His face reddened. "Company policies? Marcus, I'm your brother." "At Henderson Industries, you're an employee in the accounting department. So that's it? You're going to act like we're strangers?" "I'm going to act like a CEO who takes his responsibilities seriously." He stared at me for a long moment, then shook his head, in disgust. "You know what? I get it now. The power went to your head. You think you're better than us." "I think I'm responsible for the livelihoods of 400 employees, including yours." "Including mine," he repeated bitterly. "Great. So now I have to worry about job security because my little brother is on some kind of power trip." Patricia chose that moment to arrive for her shift, and Kevin stormed off without another word. But Friday brought the real betrayal. I was in my executive office, reviewing quarterly reports, when Sarah knocked on my door with a worried expression. "We have a problem," she said, closing the door behind her. She handed me a tablet showing email records. "This is from Robert Thompson's company account. He's been using Henderson Industries' client database to reach out to potential new business contacts." I scrolled through the emails, my anger building with each message. Uncle Robert had sent personalized outreach to 17 different companies, introducing himself as Senior Operations Manager Robert Thompson, nephew of Henderson Industries CEO Marcus Thompson. He was name-dropping our family relationship to generate new business leads. But worse than that, he was promising services Henderson Industries didn't offer, and pricing structures that would lose us money on every contract. It gets worse, Sarah said. He's scheduled meetings with 3 of our existing clients for this afternoon. According to his calendar, he's planning to pitch them expanded partnership opportunities with direct family oversight. I felt something cold settle in my stomach. Uncle Robert wasn't just exploiting our family connection. He was potentially sabotaging existing client relationships by promising things we couldn't deliver. "What do you want me to do?" Sarah asked. I thought about Uncle Robert sitting at that dinner table, bragging about Henderson Industries' excellent management while suggesting I should be grateful for any opportunity to work there. I thought about him describing our CEO as a young hotshot who'd built something impressive. Now he was trying to cash in on being related to that same CEO he'd never bothered to actually meet. "Cancel his meetings," I said. "All of them. And schedule a disciplinary review for Monday morning. Are you sure? He is your uncle. He's an employee who's violating company policy and potentially damaging client relationships." Sarah nodded and left to handle the situation. I sat alone in my office, looking out at the Chicago skyline, feeling the weight of what was happening. For 7 years, I'd maintained the fiction that I was struggling, underachieving, barely getting by. My family had responded with condescension, mockery, and pity. Now, less than a week after learning the truth, they were all scrambling to benefit from my success. Not one of them had apologized for their treatment of me. Not one of them had acknowledged that their assumptions about my life had been wrong. Instead, they'd immediately started calculating how my success could benefit them. Jessica wanted a promotion. Kevin wanted advancement. Uncle Robert wanted to leverage our family connection for business development. Even David had started sending me LinkedIn articles about emerging opportunities in tech integration, obviously hoping to position himself as a strategic advisor. They saw my revelation not as vindication of my choices, but as an opportunity to exploit. The betrayal wasn't just personal, it was professional. They were willing to compromise Henderson Industries' integrity and reputation to advance their own interests. And that was something I couldn't forgive. By 6 p.m. Friday, I'd made my decision. Sarah had successfully canceled Uncle Robert's client meetings, but the damage to trust was irreversible. Jessica had started spreading rumors in the marketing department about her special relationship with executive leadership. Kevin had begun acting like company policies didn't apply to him. They weren't celebrating my success. They were trying to steal pieces of it. But they'd forgotten something important. I'd spent 7 years building Henderson Industries into a company that could succeed without shortcuts, without nepotism, without compromising its values. I wasn't about to let family members destroy what I'd worked so hard to create. It was time for them to learn the real cost of their assumptions. Monday. Morning arrived with the weight of inevitability. I'd spent the weekend making difficult decisions that would permanently alter my family relationships, but protecting Henderson Industries had to come first. At 8 a.m. sharp, I walked into our headquarters wearing my best charcoal suit and carrying a leather portfolio that contained documentation of every policy violation my family members had committed over the past week. Sarah met me at the executive elevator with a somber expression. "HR is ready," she said as we rode to the 25th floor. "Legal has reviewed everything. The evidence is overwhelming." "And you're comfortable with this approach?" She paused before answering. "Marcus, if these were any other employees, they would have been terminated immediately. The fact that you're giving them formal disciplinary reviews instead of pink slips is actually generous." The first meeting was scheduled for 8:30 a.m. Uncle D. Robert. He arrived 5 minutes early, dressed in his best suit and carrying a coffee from the building's lobby cafe. His body language projected confidence, almost swagger. He clearly thought this meeting was about discussing his business development initiatives, not addressing his misconduct. "Marcus," he said warmly, extending his hand as he entered the conference room. "I have to say, I'm still getting used to this whole situation. My nephew, the CEO, your grandmother would be so proud. I didn't shake his hand. Instead, I gestured to the chair across from the conference table where Sarah sat with an open laptop and a stack of documents. Robert, please sit down. This is a formal disciplinary review. His confident smile faltered. Disciplinary? I think there's been some misunderstanding. No misunderstanding. Over the past 5 days, you've violated multiple company policies regarding data access, client communications, and unauthorized business development activities. I slid a printed report across the table. This documents 17 instances where you used Henderson Industries' client database to generate personal business leads. You contacted clients without authorization, promised services we don't provide, and used our family relationship as a marketing tool. Uncle Robert's face went pale as he scanned the document. Marcus, I was just trying to help the company grow. You thought your family connection gave you special privileges, I interrupted. It doesn't. Sarah opened her laptop. Mr. Thompson, we have digital records of all communications sent from your company email account. Would you like us to review them individually? He shifted uncomfortably in his chair. Look, maybe I got a little enthusiastic. But Marcus, we're family. Surely we can work this out. The fact that we're family makes this worse, not better. You exploited confidential information and potentially damaged client relationships. For the first time since I'd known him, Uncle Robert looked genuinely worried. What are you saying? Are you firing me? I leaned back in my chair, studying his face. A week ago, this man had been lecturing me about the value of ambition and suggesting I should be grateful for any opportunity to work at Henderson Industries. Now he was begging to keep his job at the company I owned. You're receiving a formal written reprimand, I said finally. Your access to client databases is permanently revoked. Any future client communications must be pre-approved by your department head, and you're being transferred to a different division. Transferred? To where? Facilities management. You'll be overseeing building maintenance and office supplies. The demotion was significant. Uncle Robert had been managing operational relationships with major clients. Now he'd be responsible for ordering printer paper and scheduling carpet. Cleaning. Marcus, that's not fair. I've been with this company for 6 years. I know these clients personally, which is exactly why you can't be trusted with access to them anymore. He stared at me for a long moment, his face cycling through anger, disbelief, and finally resignation. And if I refuse the transfer? Then you'll be terminated for cause, which means no severance package and no positive reference for future employment. Uncle Robert signed the disciplinary paperwork with a trembling hand. As he left the conference room, he paused at the door. You know, your father always said you were different. I just never realized how cold you could be. Have a good day, Robert. The second meeting was with Jessica at 10 a.m. She arrived wearing a conservative navy dress and minimal makeup, clearly trying to project professionalism and humility. But her eyes were calculating, already working angles before she'd even sat. Down! Marcus, I want to start by apologizing, she said immediately. I handled things poorly last week. I was shocked, confused, maybe a little hurt that you hadn't trusted us with the truth. It was a carefully rehearsed opening, designed to position herself as the reasonable family member who deserved special consideration. Jessica, you accessed employee databases beyond your authorization level. You downloaded confidential reports that have nothing to do with your marketing responsibilities. She blinked rapidly. I was just trying to understand the company better, to be more effective in my role. Sarah slid a tablet across the table, showing Jessica's computer activity logs. You spent 47 minutes reviewing executive compensation, data, and downloaded client lists for departments you've never worked with. I was researching potential marketing opportunities. You were gathering intelligence about company finances and organizational structure, I interrupted. Information that could be valuable to competitors. Jessica's carefully constructed composure cracked slightly. Marcus, You're making this sound like industrial espionage. I'm your cousin. You're a marketing coordinator who violated multiple confidentiality agreements. But I would never. Jessica, 3 days after learning I owned this company, you came to my workplace to request a promotion to the executive team. You've been telling colleagues in the marketing department that you have special access to leadership. You're already trying to benefit from family connections instead of earning advancement through performance. She sat back in her chair, her face flushing. So what are you saying? That being family means nothing? It means you should have higher standards, not lower ones. The disciplinary action for Jessica was similar to Uncle Robert's. Formal reprimand, restricted access to confidential systems and a transfer. She'd be moving from marketing to customer service, handling client complaints and basic account management. Customer service? She said, her voice cracking. Marcus, I have a degree in marketing. I've been building relationships with major clients. Those relationships belong to Henderson Industries, not to you personally, and your new role will help you understand our business from the customer perspective. This is humiliating. There are consequences. She signed the paperwork with angry, jerky motions. You know what? Everyone always said you were weird, but I defended you. I told them you were just misunderstood. Thank you for that. But they were right. You are weird. And now you're powerful and weird, which is worse. After she left, I sat alone in the conference room for a few minutes, feeling the weight of what I was doing. These weren't just employees. They were family members I'd grown up with, people who'd been part of my life for decades. But they'd made their choices. Instead of celebrating my success or acknowledging their mistakes, they'd immediately tried to exploit our relationship for personal gain. The third meeting was with Kevin at 2 p.m. He arrived looking haggard, like he hadn't slept well over the weekend. Unlike Jessica's calculated approach or Uncle Robert's initial confidence, Kevin seemed genuinely defeated before the meeting even started. I already know why I'm here, he said as he sat down. Jessica texted me about her meeting this morning. Then, you understand the seriousness of the situation. He nodded slowly. I accessed financial records I wasn't authorized to see. I assumed being your brother gave me special privileges. The acknowledgement was more honest than I'd expected. Kevin, you downloaded quarterly profit statements, executive compensation data, and investor information. That's confidential material. That could affect stock prices when we go public. I know, Marcus, finding out you owned the company I've been working for, it messed with my head. I felt like an idiot. So you decided to access confidential information without authorization. I wanted to understand how successful you really were, how much money the company was making, whether my little brother was actually worth more than our entire family combined. The honesty was refreshing, but it didn't change the facts. Kevin, your performance in the accounting department has been solid. Your work is accurate, your reports are timely, and your colleagues respect you. But trust is fundamental in financial roles. He looked up at me with tired eyes. You're firing me. I'm transferring you to our Phoenix expansion team. You'll be helping set up the new office's accounting systems. It's actually a promotion. Assistant Controller for the Southwest Division. Kevin blinked in surprise. Phoenix? But it's a fresh start, away from Chicago office politics and family complications. You'll be helping build something new instead of trying to leverage something existing. You're sending me away. I'm giving you an opportunity to prove yourself without family dynamics interfering. He sat quietly for several minutes, processing the offer. What if I don't want to move to Phoenix? Then you'll be terminated for violating confidentiality policies. Some choice. Kevin, you accessed confidential financial data without authorization. The only reason you're getting offered a transfer instead of immediate termination is because your actual work performance has been good. He signed the transfer paperwork slowly, like he was signing his own exile. Marcus, for what it's worth, I'm sorry. Not just about the database thing. About Saturday night, about all the times we made jokes about your job, about not taking you seriously. It was the first genuine apology I'd received from any family member. I appreciate that, Kevin. Are we okay? As brothers, I mean? I considered the question. We will be. But it's going to take time. The final meeting was with David at 4 p.m. He arrived early and spent 15 minutes pacing in the lobby before Sarah escorted him upstairs. Unlike the others, David looked terrified. Marcus, I need you to know, I didn't access any databases or contact any clients. I researched the company online, but only public information. His fear was palpable, and honestly, justified. David worked in IT, which meant his potential for damage was enormous if he'd chosen to abuse his access. David, our security logs show you spent significant time researching Henderson Industries' corporate structure, investor relationships, and market position. But only public records. I used Google and LinkedIn and business journals. I didn't hack anything or access internal systems. Sarah confirmed this with a nod. David had been careful to stay within legal boundaries, even if his motivations were questionable. What were you trying to accomplish? I asked. I wanted to understand what you'd built, how big Henderson Industries really was, whether he trailed off, looking embarrassed. What? Whether you were actually successful enough to help me with my career. The brutal honesty was almost refreshing. At least David was admitting his motivations instead of pretending this was about family loyalty. David, your work in IT has been excellent. You've helped implement security protocols that protected confidential information from exactly the kind of breaches your relatives attempted. He looked confused. So I'm not in trouble? You're not being disciplined, but you are being watched. IT access carries enormous responsibility. Any attempt to leverage our family relationship for career advancement will result in immediate termination. Understood. Completely understood. And David? No more research projects about Henderson Industries' corporate structure. If you want to understand the company better, focus on excelling in your current role. After David left, I sat alone in the conference room as the Chicago skyline darkened outside the windows. In one day, I'd disciplined 3 family members and exiled my brother to Arizona. But Henderson Industries was protected. The company culture I'd spent 7 years building, based on merit, integrity, and professional excellence, remained intact. Sarah knocked on the conference room door. How are you feeling? Like I just performed surgery on my own family. Sometimes that's what leadership requires. She was right. But it didn't make the decisions any easier. My phone was already buzzing with angry text messages from family members who'd heard about the disciplinary meetings. My father, Marcus, what you did to Robert was harsh. He's been loyal to that company for years. Aunt Sandra, I can't believe you transferred Jessica to customer service. She's better than that. But it was the message from my grandmother that hit hardest. I'm proud of what you built, but disappointed in how you're treating your family. I turned off my phone and looked out at the city lights beginning to twinkle below. Leadership meant making decisions that protected the organization, even when those decisions hurt people you cared about. My family had spent years treating me like a failure. When they learned about my success, their first instinct was to exploit it rather than celebrate it. Now they were learning that success came with responsibilities they hadn't considered, and actions had consequences they hadn't anticipated. 3. Months passed before my family attempted any significant contact. 3 months of silence, professional distance, and the slow realization that their actions had permanently altered our relationships. During that time, Henderson Industries thrived. The Phoenix expansion launched ahead of schedule, creating 347 jobs and generating positive coverage in Arizona business journals. Kevin's work setting up the Southwest Division's accounting systems was actually exceptional. Distance from family politics had allowed him to focus purely on professional excellence. Jessica's customer service role, initially seen as punishment, had become an unexpected education. Handling client complaints gave her insights into operational problems she'd never encountered in marketing. Her solutions-oriented approach was earning recognition from department supervisors who had no idea about her family connections. Uncle Robert's transition to facilities management was less successful. He performed his duties adequately, but with obvious resentment. The man who'd once bragged about Henderson Industries' excellent leadership now spent his days coordinating carpet cleaning schedules and ordering office supplies. David had become our most security-conscious IT employee, implementing protocols that exceeded industry standards. Whether motivated by fear or genuine professional growth, his work was impeccable. But the real test came on a cold February morning when my grandmother called. "Marcus, we need to talk." Eleanor Thompson, 84 years old and sharper than most people half her age, had been the family matriarch for decades. She'd watched my parents' marriage, helped raise 3 grandsons, and loaned me the money. That started Henderson Industries. "Of course, Grandma. What's on your mind?" "Family dinner. This Sunday. Everyone will be there." The way she said everyone made it clear this wasn't a request. "Grandma, I'm not sure that's a good idea." "Marcus, you've proven your point. You built something remarkable, and you protected it when family members tried to take advantage. But hiding behind corporate policies forever isn't the answer." She was right, as usual, but I wasn't sure I was ready to face the collective judgment of relatives who'd spent 3 months processing their resentment. "What's the purpose of this dinner?" clearing the air. "Either we move forward as a family, or we acknowledge that business has destroyed our personal relationships forever." The stakes couldn't have been clearer. Sunday arrived with a snowstorm that blanketed Chicago in pristine white. I drove to my grandmother's house in Evanston, passing the Henderson Industries headquarters building, where lights still burned in several offices despite the weekend. My success had become visible in ways I couldn't hide anymore. Local business. Journals had featured Henderson Industries as one of Chicago's fastest-growing companies. I'd been invited to speak at Northwestern's business school about entrepreneurship and operational excellence. The mayor's office had contacted us about expanding our Chicago operations. The shy, underachieving cousin was now a recognized business leader, whether I wanted the attention or not. Grandma's house was warm and filled with the aroma of her famous pot roast, the same meal that had been served at that fateful dinner 4 months ago. But the atmosphere was completely different. My parents arrived first. Dad looked older, more tired than I remembered. Mom seemed nervous, fidgeting with her purse and avoiding eye contact. "Marcus," Dad said, extending his hand formally. "Thank you for coming." The handshake was awkward, loaded with unspoken tension. This was the man who'd expressed disappointment in my choices for years, who'd worried that his youngest son was wasting his potential. Now he was greeting me like a business associate rather than family. Uncle Robert arrived next with Aunt Sandra, both looking uncomfortable. Robert nodded stiffly in my direction but didn't attempt conversation. The man who'd once lectured me about ambition and opportunity now avoided discussing work entirely. Jessica came alone, having recently ended a relationship that couldn't survive. Her new work schedule and changed perspective on success. She looked different, less polished, more grounded. Customer service had taught her lessons about real problems that marketing campaigns couldn't solve. David arrived with his laptop bag, unable to completely disconnect from work even on Sundays. His paranoia about security breaches had made him valuable to Henderson Industries but socially awkward in family settings. Kevin participated via video call from Phoenix, his face appearing on Grandma's tablet propped against a stack of cookbooks. He looked healthier, more relaxed than I'd seen him in years. Arizona was agreeing with him. We gathered around the same dining room table where this story had begun, but the seating arrangement reflected our new reality. I no longer sat at the far end like an afterthought. Grandma had placed me at her right hand, in the position traditionally reserved for the family's most successful member. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. Grandma waited until everyone had filled their plates before speaking. "We're here because this family is broken, and I won't tolerate it anymore." The bluntness was vintage Eleanor Thompson. No small talk, no diplomatic preamble. 4 months ago, most of you treated Marcus like a failure. You mocked his job, questioned his choices, and suggested he should be grateful for any opportunity to work at a company he actually owned. Uncle Robert shifted uncomfortably. Jessica stared at her plate. When you learned the truth, instead of apologizing or celebrating his success, you immediately tried to profit from it. You accessed confidential information, leveraged family connections for business advantage, and treated his company like your personal opportunity. The silence was heavy, loaded with shame and resentment. Marcus responded by protecting his business, which was appropriate. But now we have a family where business relationships have replaced personal ones. That's unacceptable. She turned to face me directly. Marcus, you've proven you can be successful. You've shown you can make difficult decisions. But leadership isn't just about protecting what you've built. It's about lifting others up without compromising your principles. Then she addressed the rest of the family. And all of you need to decide whether you want to be part of Marcus's life or just part of his payroll. The challenge hung in the air like smoke. Uncle Robert spoke first, his voice rough with emotion. Marcus, I owe you an apology, not just for the database thing or the client contacts. For every time I suggested you weren't ambitious enough, every time I implied you were wasting your potential. He paused, struggling with words. I spent 6 years working for a company I admired, respecting leadership I never met, and the whole time, that leadership was my nephew who I'd been treating like a disappointment. The admission was painful to hear because it was completely honest. I don't expect forgiveness, he continued, but I want you to know that transferring me to facilities management was probably the best thing that could have happened. It forced me to remember that every job has dignity if you do it well. Jessica spoke next, her voice quieter than usual. Marcus, I've spent 3 months handling customer complaints, and you know what I learned? Most of our problems come from people in positions like my old one, people who think they understand the business but have never dealt with real consequences. She looked up at me for the first time since arriving. Customer service taught me more about Henderson Industries in 3 months than in 2 years in marketing. I know why you transferred me now. It wasn't punishment. It was education. David cleared his throat nervously. I need to say something too. When I found out you owned Henderson Industries, my first thought wasn't, wow, my cousin is amazing. It was, how can this help my career? That's messed up. He adjusted his glasses, looking uncomfortable with the attention. But working under the security protocols you implemented, knowing that my job is protecting the company from people like I almost became, it's made me better at what I do. Kevin's voice came through the tablet speakers, slightly delayed by the video connection. Marcus, moving to Phoenix was the best thing that happened to my career. Not because of the promotion, but because it got me away from family dynamics that were making me crazy. His image on the screen was clear and honest. I spent 2 years working for Henderson Industries, complaining about lack of recognition and advancement opportunities. But I wasn't focused on excelling at my job. I was focused on being noticed by leadership. He paused, then continued. Turns out, when you actually focus on being excellent at your work instead of playing politics, people notice for the right reasons. My father had been listening quietly, but now he leaned forward. Son, I owe you the biggest apology. For 30 years, I've measured success by traditional standards, steady employment, conventional advancement, playing by established rules. His voice carried the weight of genuine regret. I was so worried about you following a normal path that I never considered you might be creating a better path. Mom reached across the table and touched my hand. Marcus, we failed you. Not just recently, but for years. We saw your independence as rebellion instead of recognizing it as leadership. The apologies were sincere, but I could see the real question in everyone's eyes. What happened now? I appreciate everyone's honesty, I said finally. But apologies. Don't erase what happened. You all made choices based on what you thought I was worth. When you learned my actual worth, you made different choices. Jessica winced. Uncle Robert nodded grimly. However, I continued, Grandma is right about one thing. Leadership means lifting people up without compromising principles. I pulled out my phone and opened a document I'd prepared. Henderson Industries is launching a family education program, scholarship fund for cousins' children, college tuition assistance for family members who want to advance their education, and a charitable foundation focused on helping underestimated entrepreneurs. David looked up sharply. What does that mean? It means I'm using my success to create opportunities for my family without compromising the company's integrity. Your children can earn scholarships based on merit. Family members can access educational resources to improve their skills, and will help other people who remind me of myself 7 years ago. Jessica's eyes filled with tears. Marcus, you don't have to. I'm not doing this because I have to. I'm doing it because it's right. I looked around the table at faces that had once dismissed me as a failure. But there are conditions. Family members will always be held to higher standards, not lower ones. Personal relationships and business relationships remain separate. And any attempt to exploit family connections for professional advantage will result in immediate termination. No second chances. Uncle Robert nodded soberly. Understood. One more thing, I said. Kevin, your work in Phoenix has been excellent. I'm recommending you for the regional controller position when it opens next year. Not because you're my brother, but because you've earned it. Kevin's face on the tablet screen lit up with genuine surprise and gratitude. And Jessica, the customer service insights you've developed are valuable. I'm creating a new position. Customer Experience Analyst, focused on translating client feedback into operational improvements. It's yours if you want it. She nodded, unable to speak. David, Henderson Industries is expanding our cybersecurity division. We'll need a department head who understands both technical security and human nature. Interested? David's eyes widened. Seriously? Based on merit and performance. Family relationship doesn't get you the job, but it doesn't disqualify you either. Grandma smiled with satisfaction. Now that's how you lead a family and run a business. As the evening wound down, the atmosphere had shifted fundamentally. We were no longer the same family that had gathered 4 months ago. The old dynamics, based on assumptions, traditional hierarchies, and comfortable prejudices, had been replaced by something more honest and more complex. My parents treated me with a new respect that was both gratifying and slightly sad. The easy familiarity of childhood was gone, replaced by the careful consideration adults show each other when power dynamics are unclear. Uncle Robert and I would probably never be close, but there was mutual respect now. He understood that his nephew was someone whose decisions affected his livelihood, and I understood that he was genuinely trying to rebuild his reputation through better work. Jessica had become someone I could actually talk to as an equal. Customer service had humbled her enough to listen, and educated her enough to contribute meaningfully to business discussions. David was thriving under the pressure of real responsibility, and Kevin was building something valuable in Phoenix without the complications of family politics. But the most important change was in how I saw myself. For 7 years, I'd defined my success in opposition to my family's expectations. I'd built Henderson Industries partly to prove them wrong, and I'd maintained my anonymity partly to avoid their interference. Now I could define success on its own terms, by the impact I was having on employees, clients, and the broader business community. 6 months later, Henderson Industries went public with an IPO that raised $240 million for expansion. My name appeared on the cover of Chicago Business Journal as Entrepreneur of the Year. Northwestern invited me to deliver the commencement address for business school graduates. But the moment that mattered most was a quiet Tuesday evening when I was working late at Henderson Industries. Patricia Martinez, the owner of Brewster's Coffee House, called my office directly. "Marcus, this is Patricia. I hope you don't mind me calling, but I had to tell you something." "Of course, Patricia. What's going on?" "I just got off the phone with a reporter from the Chicago Tribune. She's doing a story about successful entrepreneurs who maintain connections to their communities. Somehow she found out that Marcus Thompson from Henderson Industries used to work at my coffee shop." I smiled. The anonymity was completely gone now. "She asked me what kind of employee you were," Patricia continued, "and I told her you were the best worker I ever had. Always on time, never complained, treated customers with respect, and somehow made everyone around you better at their jobs." She paused. "I also told her that now I understand why. You weren't just making coffee, you were learning how to lead." After hanging up, I sat in my office looking out at the Chicago skyline. Lights twinkled in offices where people were working late, building their own versions of success. My phone buzzed with a text from Kevin in Phoenix. "Closed the biggest deal in our division's history today. Thanks for believing in me." Then Jessica. "Customer experience analysis identified a problem that could have cost us $300K. Feels good to contribute something real." And finally, David. "Prevented 3 attempted security breaches this week. Henderson Industries data has never been safer. My family had spent years mocking my minimum wage job, never realizing they were working for the company I owned. Now, they understand that success isn't about the job you have. It's about the value you create and the people you lift up along the way." The underachiever they'd dismissed was now employing over 600 people across 9 states. The coffee shop worker they'd pitied was now recognized as one of the region's most innovative business leaders. But more importantly, the family that had been broken by assumptions and exploitation had been rebuilt on a foundation of honesty, mutual respect, and shared purpose. Sometimes the greatest success isn't proving people wrong. It's helping them become better than they thought they could be. And sometimes, the best revenge is showing people what they could have celebrated all along. Looking for more? We've got 2 amazing stories ready for you right on screen. If this one touched you, these are absolutely worth your time. Click to watch them now. And hey, subscribe and hit that bell to never miss our latest uploads.